I've seen such awful things in my life. And even certain decisions I took ended in people being killed.
Explain your unique position. You said you saw a lot of wars. You were UN. Explain what you did exactly.
My experience was, of course, almost entirely in countries that were at war or were affected by war in one way or another. You know, it is something which is very heavily burdened on you, even when you're retired still. The war we have now around us, they really put us all in great danger. And the great danger comes because I think the European politicians are also so awfully pro-war that they are unable presently to do anything to maintain peace or to bring peace back to Europe.
It's better always to solve something diplomatically, or there is some cases that the war is justified?
I'm deeply attached to the UN Charter. We had this huge advantage that after the two world wars, people assembled in San Francisco and agreed on the UN Charter. And this UN Charter means never again war. There is no such thing as a good war, a bad war, a justified war, an unjustified war. It's done, that no war anymore.
Your message is very simple.
Yeah.
Peace. Let's try to do all compromises for peace. I fully agree. Because you can state facts, explain things in a very convincing way and all this stuff, but it's like, there's nothing that can justify people dying.
The military technology has developed in such a way that we can basically destroy the entire world within 10 to 15 minutes.
You mean nuclear weapons?
Yeah, of course. Look how close we are in Ukraine war on the use of nuclear weapons.
It's crazy that we even talk about it, right?
Unbelievable. And we talk about it if it's nothing. We're talking here about the survival of this planet.
This thing that you said, you took some decisions that people died.
Yeah.
Can you explain us more? You spent all your time silence, or your life silence. Now is the time to talk.
That's right, yes. Most of my work was meant to be quiet. Because if you negotiate between war parties, you better don't go public. Because the moment you go public, or you take pictures on one side or the other side, they will start to mistrust you. So you have to pull yourself back. Although your role, of course, is very important to talk to these two people, but not in public, because people are very quickly embarrassed that certain positions they have taken has come out, or they assume that you talk about these things. So my job now is a very different one. Now with you, I have to talk to the public. And before it was my job to try to get peace between opposing parties. And now I think in the European Parliament, my job is actually, hopes for you to speak to you young people and to tell them how important peace for their future is. And so if we don't change anything, we will lose the peace.
So this is what you think your job now is in the parliament, to tell to young people about peace?
To all people, but I think it's particularly important for young people because, you know, we have not so long to live anymore. But they have to live. They will have children. They want to have a future. They want to live in a Europe that is peaceful, that has social justice, you know, where environment is protected, where they find, it's worth living. And the war we have now around us, they really put us all in great danger. And the great danger comes because I think the European politicians are also so awfully pro-war that they are unable presently to do anything to maintain peace or to bring peace back to Europe.
Why do you think this is the case? Like most of the majority, like more than when we vote about the war and all this stuff, most of the parliament is voting pro-guns and keep funding wars and not for diplomacy. Why do you think this is the case in Europe?
You know, for me, I can only say the political elite in Europe, or the old political elite, the established political elite, sees, of course, the influence waning in the world. You know, we are all a generation where we use, because we have a white skin, because we come from Europe, we have to tell anybody how the world is. You know, for 400 years, maybe some say 500 years, we were colonial powers, or we dominated. First we say it's because of Christianity, then it was because we are the civilized guys. Now it's because of democracy. Nowhere they have brought any democracy, by the way. I'm very much for democracy, don't forget this. But I mean, we use this always to say, we have to dominate, we have to tell you where it goes along. And I think the first time we realize that this time has come to an end. And the symbol why it comes to an end is the Ukraine war. The Ukraine war is not this by itself, but it takes the shape. It's a war we had thought we could win very easily. You know, we always thought Russia is not even a country. We said, oh, Russia is a petrol station. Or, you know, we had all these nasty little things about Russia. And now Russia is winning the war. And we are losing it. Like we have lost all the wars in the last 30 years. We shouldn't forget. I've seen a lot of these wars and how we behave in them.
So, explain your unique position. You said you saw a lot of wars. You were UN. Explain what you did exactly, and then we can come back to the war in Ukraine to see why we're losing, what will be the outcome, and what state you think we are now. But yeah,
my experience was, of course, almost entirely in countries that were at war or were affected by war in one way or another. Many wars were not between another state, but were intrastate wars or with non-state actors inside and things like this one. And I was assigned in these missions, and from 92 I was usually heading this mission or being at least in a very senior position.
You initiated this life, or you kind of life brought you into this path of being in the middle of wars and trying to find peace with the UN and all this stuff?
I mean, I just came to it. I don't know how. I mean, I sometimes... It's maybe not a joke, but I must say sometimes I think, you know, they think, what do you do with Michael Schulenburg? He's such a crazy, he doesn't fit here in the bureaucracy. We sent them out to the war countries. Yeah, I've been there, and I must say I found a very interesting life. I mean, I've been many times in Afghanistan, and we shouldn't forget what it includes. I mean, to negotiate, for instance, the withdrawal of the Soviet Union, which I was involved, of course, at the UN junior level, I had to go on a horseback for 3 months through all Afghanistan to talk to the Mujahideen commander if they would agree.
With the horse?
On a horse, yes, over the passes. Yeah, no electricity, nothing. And, you know, we just had a problem with my wife. She complained, you know, when I went out for over a month, she didn't know whether I was alive or not because we didn't have any communications equipment at the time. You know, we couldn't communicate. So we just walked over these mountains. Some passes were over 4,000 meters.
So you have also the secret to happy wedding as well, to not talk to your wife for 1 month.
I must say, we had, that's maybe off the camera, but we had a huge problem. But 2 days ago, we really got very well along. I love very much my wife, and she's my wife since 37 years. I think me having a job in war countries where she can't come along, you know, my first child was born without me even being present, and you know, these are difficult things. Sometimes I think they always say that I did sort of the courageous jobs, but I think now after talking to my wife, I think maybe she was the courageous one, and I was only the adventurous one, and so my life wasn't a very easier because I quite liked adventures, I must say. I like danger. Funny enough, dangerous situation make me very calm, very calm. This building makes me much more nervous. And
we're in the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen.
There was all these cameras and things like this one. Anyway, so no, I have a very good relationship with my wife, very, very dear, and that is probably the most stabilizing factor in my life. Yeah.
Okay, can you explain us this? So you on a horse and go on to negotiate with.
Yeah, you see
how these negotiations.
Maybe people don't know the history anymore, but you know at the time.
I don't.
Yeah, we can't. And most your listeners will not know, but you know the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and the UN helped the Soviet Union to withdraw from Afghanistan and to try to have a peaceful solution afterwards. And the big problem was what happens afterwards. It would really be peaceful because the negotiations did not take place. No Afghan war were involved in the negotiation. It was between the Soviet Union and Pakistan. Now, the assumption was that the Soviet Union would represent the Najibullah government at the time. They say pro-communist government. He was as much communist as I am. I mean, all these things we give on people, it's usually not true. Anyway, he was a government, and the Mujahideen were represented by Pakistan, but this is of course not true. It is of course not true, and you know, and I have met all of these people, and we tried to persuade them not to attack the cities and to accept a transition arrangement with the United Nations. So we had to go actually to...
So you go to their house and you say, hi, I don't want you to attack the cities.
To go through Afghanistan with all the controlled by different mujahideen groups is very dangerous. You have to negotiate your way from one place to the other. And there's a certain code of conduct in Afghanistan which you have to observe. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So you have to be invited, usually on a piece of paper. That might be sometimes only a little piece of paper, not bigger than this one, and somebody scribbled on it. You realize he couldn't write. But he only scribbled something. But it was an invitation, and that would guarantee your life as long as you would be in the next things. It would guarantee your life. Don't forget, you played with your life all the time in negotiating one group after the other. So we had to...
So their word matter in a way.
In Afghanistan, absolutely. I've never been in a country where somebody is so down on the word as they agreed it, which is never written down. There's no handshake. If they agree, they do it. I have not seen any Afghan breaking their words, ever.
And then...
We have a different image of it. But I negotiate also with Mullah Omar. Many people don't know who Mullah Omar.
I don't.
He was the head of the Taliban. Yeah, Mullah Omar is the one-eyed man, who... and I was very few who met him and negotiate the release of 40 hostages in Kandahar on the floor, somewhere in the dark. It was an amazing thing. Where I thought, it was I would be killed, but I wasn't in the end.
So you went and negotiated with him, and it was hostages also in the building.
He gave me all on the day. He agreed. They were all there, and I could take them back home. It was really,
so he gave you the hostage.
Absolutely, he agreed, and there was. And we have never signed an agreement. Very few countries where that happens. And I think that's also why the Taliban are back in power in Afghanistan.
Why?
Because I think Afghans think they bring more justice to the country. It's not our justice. I'm not defending them, but there is a reason. That they have been able to defeat the whole NATO. They have no support from outside. Can only be if they have the support from inside the country. And it's very, very, very difficult for us to accept, but I think we have to.
It's interesting. Didn't you find that all the conflicts have a lot more nuances and is more complicated to the people close than we see on the surface in the media?
Yeah, no, of course. When you're close, and that's also why you would not make any public statements. In our public statements, we talk always about morale. But morale, because they did this one, they are doing something against the women, and they killed, and think about the Ukraine war. But in the end, wars go about interests. Moral doesn't play a role. And the biggest problem for a negotiator is to pinpoint why a war takes place. It's not easy. You have to know why a war takes place.
And understand both of the sides, understand what they want.
Both sides will not tell you the truth, because both sides are in their own war propaganda justification. Russia is an imperialistic country, and Russia says probably the same.
We have the same thing in my country, Cyprus.
You have, and as a negotiator, and you don't even mention it, but you have to bring the parties to this point to accept that this is what it's about, because only then...
What do you mean bring the country? You mean both of the parts? Both of the
sides. It goes even without mentioning it. It's I can't explain it. Sometimes when you have... I'm often gone to universities just to give speeches because they like me, because I've seen the real things. And I'm asked very often, where did you learn doing this? And I said, I got divorced in Germany. A German lady, very aggressive, all the things. There's everything what you have in a divorce case, you have also in the war, only on a different scale. It's very similar. And the solution is very similar. I tell you, there are 3 words.
That's interesting.
3 words only that really matter. Respect. You have to respect the other. We don't respect Russia, so we can't negotiate with them. Respect. Listening. They also have a story. Not only us have a story. Listen, not accepting. And to understand. You have to try to understand. And now say you are understanding Putin or whatever, make it negative. But every officer will have to first try to understand what the other side wants and how it would act. That's what you have to do in negotiations too. And if you have even a trouble with your wife or things like this one, the moment respect goes down, listening is not there anymore, and understanding also not. When you reach this and you say that afterwards to your children, don't worry, your parents understand each other again. You even use the same language, no? Please understand, the conflict is over. It doesn't mean that we agree on everything, but the conflict is over. And with negotiations just the same. So all I did actually was something extremely simple. Only when people don't like each other, it becomes very, very complicated. That's what wars are all about.
Respect, listening, and understanding.
Yeah, understand the other guy. Understand them. I mean, it is actually a circle, because if you understand somebody, you start also to respect the person. It doesn't mean that you agree with a person. It just means that you accept that he sees the world differently, and for him this is a problem which for you is not a problem, or vice versa. This is what it is.
And you came to find out through your experience that it's better always to solve something diplomatically instead of with aggressive, or there is some cases that the war is justified and it will help to bring more justice.
I'm deeply attached to the UN Charter. I've seen such awful things in my life. I mean, really awful things, and even certain decisions I took ended in people being killed. It is something which is very heavily burden on you, even when you're retired still. And I don't want even to talk about these stories.
I will force you later, don't worry.
But wars are something awful. Now, we had this huge advantage that after the 2 world wars, people assembled in San Francisco and agreed on the UN Charter. And this UN Charter means never again war. It means never again war. And so when we try now to justify the war in Ukraine with the UN Charter, I think it's a perversion, because it's never again war. And it says we have to negotiate our things. We have to understand, and we have to bring other people in and negotiate to help us. That it doesn't have to be solved with weapons. I don't think that, we had, of course, the Second World War. There's always an example against Hitler. But, UN Charter was after the Second World War. They were wiser than we are today. And I think that, especially in the West, we don't recognize the UN Charter anymore. It's not true that's only Russia. It's by far worse. And we don't accept the UN Charter anymore, because we are a people, and that comes what I said before, who have governed the world by force. I mean, colonialism was not by negotiations, was by force. Keeping colonies, keeping trading routes, keeping 700, 800 military bases around the world is a military thing. But it will not bring us peace. I can tell you, it will not bring us peace. And so I think the whole idea about the UN Charter, that we should negotiate, is actually a very simple idea. Negotiate. Don't use force, ever. There is no such thing as a good war, a bad war, a justified war, an unjustified war. It's done, that used before, but we said no war anymore. And this was a very wise decision. And I tell you one thing, we need this today more than ever. Because especially young people have to understand that since the UN Charter was adopted in 1945, the military technology has developed in such a way that we can basically today destroy the entire world within 10 to 15 minutes. In 10 to 15 minutes. There is hardly any time to decision anymore. It is so, the cyber war, space war, these hypersonic rockets, which go in 10 minutes, will be in Germany from Russia. This is something, once it starts, it will kill us all. I mean, there is no in between. And so now, because of this level of weapons, the charter, which says never again war, gets a completely new and even more important aspect than it was in 1945. Very important. We should not. Weapons have been developed in a way, with artificial intelligence especially, where we don't even make the decisions anymore. Some artificial intelligence will now, maybe in the future, decide whether we survive on this planet or not. I mean, it's an unbelievable, dangerous situation if we don't choose the way of the UN Charter and saying never again war.
Because let me summarize to see if I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we are advancing technologically so fast.
Yeah.
So when we are going to have war in the future, we are going to be a lot more effective. So it will be a lot more dangerous. So we need to find a way to solve this and stop this, so we prevent the...
Not only this one, I would even go one step further and saying we have a technology, if it really launched, if we go over a certain level, it will destroy everything. Then nobody will win on this.
You mean nuclear weapons?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Look how close we are in the Ukraine war on the use of nuclear weapons.
It's crazy that we even talk about it, right?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we talk about it if it's nothing. This means, yeah, we're talking here about the survival of this planet. We talk about the survival of this planet. Even if the nuclear weapons will not explode in Latin America or Africa, I mean, the climate change, all the things, the effects they have, it will, in the end, wipe us all out. And we have to go back on this one. It's not worth having a war if the consequences are so stark. If you can't win it anymore, you can't win it because, it's a question who dies first and who dies second.
So we'll come back to this thing that you said. You took some decisions that people died.
Yeah.
Can you explain us more? And how is that for you as well?
Yeah, this is now maybe complicated from this side because we can get into a completely different level here. I'll give you an example. When I was in Sierra Leone had one of the worst civil wars, and we established the army, the police, and all the things. And then we came to a stage that Sierra Leone would want to, we had 17,000 peacekeepers there. 291 lost their lives there. And the Sierra Leoneans wanted to give something back to the world. And they sent, of course, I promoted this. It's partly my decision, peacekeepers to go to Sudan, And then you get, a few months later, you get 6 caskets back of 6 of these young Sierra Leoneans being killed. And then you stand at the airport on the tarmac, with the UN flag and all the things like this one. And then, 3 meters behind you, there stand all these women with their babies on their arms because they're all very young, who lost just their husband and don't even know where he went to because it's, what do they know about Sudan? And then you have to turn around and you have to say sorry to these women who, it wasn't part of your decision that they went out. No, these things happen, and it's very. I tell you, it's personally very difficult to digest these things, especially when you retire afterwards and you have more time to think about it. It's and there are some other issues like this one, where you ask people to do something and then they don't survive it. It's a war.
So it was your decision to send some Sierra Leone people?
I was the head of the whole UN there. And of course, the ultimate decision was with me that we would do this peacekeeping. For peacekeeping. No, it's peacekeeping. Huh? It wasn't to go to war. But it was, of course, a warlike country. No? So, of course you have a responsibility. It's a moral responsibility. It's not an legal responsibility or something like this one, but it's a moral.
But you look back and you think it was the right decision still, but these lives, it was...
Very difficult to say these things. I think, we have peacekeeping. Peacekeeping costs lives. In this sense, there's no alternative to this one. I think peacekeepers are by far more peaceful than we have a U.S. Army also intervening. I mean, we can't compare this even. And but it means that people come back dead, and especially for the families. And then you have to shake hands with them. I tell you, it's not easy. It's not easy. And remember, these pictures are in your head. This is not something that goes easily out. Yeah.
So,
but that's life. Also, it's okay. But it's difficult, no? Yeah.
And that's why you are very passionate about this stuff, because all these people here, for example, in the European Parliament, including me, we never experienced something so direct like you with the war. So we vote like it's a lunch decision, what we are going to eat today. Or
I guess in this Parliament, I'm the only one who has seen really war. I mean, maybe some have been from a distance and things like that, but I've been in it, and I've seen, families who look for their sons because they can't find them anymore because they were pulverized. These explosions. I mean, it is. You have these people crying. Sometimes it's not a cry anymore and things like this one. This desperation that comes with war, whether you right war, wrong war, whatever. There is nothing heroic in it when you're in it, and then sitting up, very high up, because I'm, not important this parliament, up in the parliament, and see that a great majority sort of votes for a total war in Ukraine, a war, in this case, even a war that is already lost, and statistically, half of all soldiers who die in the last months of a war, not before. And the reason is that towards the end of a war, an army, this starts to disintegrate. And, they have to abolish, they have to withdraw from defense positions, which are very well established, to less well established. And therefore they're killed. And so when we go there and support them and we send them weapons and continue fighting, it's not their sons, not their daughters, not their houses, not their economic survival. We're getting so well paid. We get in one day probably as much paid as a soldier gets there for 6 months when he is paid at all. That's not even the question. So I think it's a deeply, deeply disturbing system. Wars, it's also deeply socially unjust, because always the poor people go to the front, and the other one come here as refugees and drive big cars. So not all of them are very small, but they do. And no, it's these poor Ukrainian betrayed people by things. And we go there and still say, you have to continue until this victory and things like this one. And basically what we commit is murder, in my view. It's real murder, because we don't consider the consequences of such decision. And if you look at these resolutions we have here of negotiations, trying to speak, trying to solve it differently, it is not a word. There is no word of negotiations, of diplomacy, of starting talks or anything, nothing in it. So these resolutions we do in the European Parliament are in breach of the UN Charter. No question about this. We commit here a breach of a UN Charter, but we accuse Russia to have breached the UN Charter.
So what do you answer to the people that they say that Zelensky got elected and he has the right to decide for the country's future, and they're choosing this kind of way to move forward to continue fighting until they achieve what the outcome that they want? What do you answer to those people?
First of all, Zelensky is not anymore elected. No, his term is up, and there was no election anymore. And the question is how many people would still follow him. But I think we have a much bigger obligation, all politicians, and that is because of the UN Charter. In the UN Charter, all countries, including Ukraine, including Russia, including the United States, and whatever European countries, they all signed up to it, saying they would all do everything in our power to prevent wars to happen. And we will do this by negotiating our conflicts. As the Charter says, we still have conflicts, we still have different interests. And in the old times, that would lead to wars, but that we would do it now, and we didn't do it in the Ukraine war, and we still don't do it. And I think that
But why? So UN is corrupted, and that's why nobody, or the United States has too much control over UN, or Europe has too much control over UN. Why this is not? They don't keep their promises in a way. Just for me to understand.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the UN is corrupted. By the way, I'm talking about the UN Charter. It is the UN. Let's leave the institutional part aside. The Charter. It's what we have all agreed on. The Charter, which says we should prevent wars, and the great powers don't do it. We have 5 great powers in the UN. You have special rights, like the veto right in the Security Council, of which 4 have repeatedly breached the UN Charter. Actually, the idea of the UN Charter was that these 5, because they are more powerful states, should be the guarantors of the UN Charter, and they are not anymore. So it's not the UN or the UN Charter that is corrupted. It's the big powers who have been corrupted and thinking they have a right to wage war and ignore what they have agreed on in the UN Charter.
So to make sure I understand how the UN kind of works, so the big countries kind of manage and hold each other accountable, and that's why they break the promise of the UN Charter, because they can do, if they agree, they can do whatever they want, kind of.
Any
and for me also, like the UN for me is something abstract. I don't really understand it. If you can help us explain, understand, because I don't know. I'm young.
First of all, it is what it says. It's United Nations. So it's all the countries of the world have agreed on a certain way to regulate their conflicts in order to prevent a war. That is what basically the UN is. There's many other things now, environment, human rights. But this is the core, is to prevent future generations to undergo any type of wars, and out of the experience of the 2 world wars. Now, for this one, we have then China, Russia, France, UK, and the United States are considered the big powers in the things, because they were at the time the big powers in the sort of world. Today they are not anymore UK is not anymore and things like this. But they have a greater decision, and if they start to ignore the UN Charter, then of course the whole thing is gone. Now, not everybody ignores the UN Charter. We have now the BRICS countries. BRICS countries, when we talk the BRICS plus the associated BRICS countries, they are 60% of the world population. 60%. NATO, of the West, is only 10%. 60%. And they subscribed again to the UN Charter, said, we want the UN Charter where everybody is equal, where every person is equal. We don't forget there's lots of very nice things in it. Every person in the world is equal. Every country in the world is equal, has equal sovereignty. That's all part of the UN Charter. And then we should negotiate our conflicts. This is something we would not be able to agree today. That's why I think young people should really look at this very easy document to read. At the beginning and afterwards, some technical things, how they're organized. But the beginning, it's a very touchy document. For me, it was very important, all the wars to over.
Put it in the description for everyone to pay a look at.
Yeah, on the UN Charter. It's something which is hope for us. And I think it's something especially young people should adapt to. I know many young people will say, oh, I've never heard about this, or I don't know, in the school we didn't learn about it, and we all don't know. But it is the document for hope. And we need it if we want to save this world of drowning into a global conflict.
So the big countries have a lot of power. So you agree kind of with the philosophy of Professor John Mearsheimer that we are living in an anarchic world, and the countries that are bigger, they do whatever they want, kind of?
Yeah. But that was not meant to be. It was not meant to be. And, in the end, we're all humans, also politicians. And we have to decide what we do with this planet. And we have now enormous facilities, technically and militarily, to destroy the whole thing. We have also the enormous courage to lift everybody out of poverty where everybody is equal, or whether is born in South Africa or Manchester or China or whatever, Brazil, that they fulfill this hope of that we all have a decent life, decent expectancies without being threatened to be killed by war or by crime, for instance. I think these are the things which will be for the next generations too. If they survive this war, it will be the big issue. And then, I hope that people become more sensitive to this. You won't learn this in our Western media because we don't like this. You won't learn this in our schools. But this is a really thing which we could engage on. It's something very, very positive. The right to live, the right that every person has a right to survive, to live. And war is taking this right away.
Is there a way for us to kind of change things? I don't know. In principle, to change it for these big countries to have waters.
Yeah.
Is there the only way?
Thank you.
That we can change this kind of how the world is functioning to this.
The interesting thing is, you have not seen the UN Charter, for instance, no? It starts saying we the people. It means it addresses itself, the Charter, not only to states, but to all people. Peace starts in the heart of all people. If people would not allow governments to have this policy, it would not happen. So I think it depends on all of us, individuals, young and old, whatever we are, wherever we are, whether we should have the same interest, whether we are born in Kenya or we are born in Frankfurt am Main in Germany or whatever, or in Paris, because war will engulf us all to keep a peaceful life. And therefore, we the people, it's addressed to all people, not only to white people or to other people or whatever. All people. And that means everybody who is alive on this earth. That's very touchy. That's very, very important. And I find it's very touchy.
So you are saying that for us to change and to want peace as all humans, and then this will take care of the rest, because we will vote for the right people, we will want the right things. So if as people change what we want, it will help.
Yeah, I think it's actually the only thing. We have an elite here in the parliament who votes for war, for extreme war even. At the same time, we have a public, we know that the public in majority doesn't like it, but they don't speak up. They don't vote accordingly.
There is a mismatch between what the people want and what the parliament votes.
Absolutely. That's the amazing thing in a democracy. It happens. And it happens only because who don't want it say we don't want, but they don't do anything more. And therefore, it's easy to ignore them.
Because you don't ask, actually, because I've been in the elections and I understood that people are not voting very, they're just have a feeling, they're not very educated, kind of exactly what's the biggest problem now that the EU faces. Let's say Ukraine. What is some people that guaranteed in the European elections that they will vote in all the ways against the war, and but you don't really do that in the elections.
I don't mind that people. Even politicians go out of instincts and something under the stomach. I don't mind this, and I would not say that a person who has less degrees in this sense or education, because there are many other educations from life and things like this, but cannot choose. I would never say that. And I've seen this in African countries, how keen people who couldn't even read and write were interested in participating in the election. No, they should, but I think they should not forget that, first of all, they have to choose for peace. They have to choose for people who say, no, there's a war. I would like to end this. I would like to negotiate it. I don't want to send more weapons. And, I think peace is something everybody will understand. I don't think you need an academic degree for this.
So do you think democracy in 2024 is good and will be for many years to come, the government system of many countries? Do you think there is a change into some directions or no? Do you like democracy? Do you find it problematic?
Yeah.
And it's like people will get shocked when we question democracy, but I like to question everything to see.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything else but democracy we should have. No, and I can understand that other countries have other systems which are not always as undemocratic as we think, but we have this sort of things. But we have to defend our democracy, and that's not done with war. It's not done with war. I think we need also democracy because I think the natural instinct of 90% or whatever of people are that they want to have peace. I don't think it's a natural instinct. I mean, it's something. It's only these elites who suddenly think that they have to gain influence in something like this one. I don't think that the average Russian or average German or average French hate each other. I don't think that is actually the case.
And the same with Americans, for example.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I saw the comments of the comment section of the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, and the comments, it was like a comment with 20,000 likes. We Americans don't want a war with Russia, and it was another. We Russians don't want a war with America.
So I think democracy, if it works, unfortunately we have big problems with our democracy. Look at the media, for instance. No? They all have one opinion. I mean, that's not democratic, no? And I mean, you have in Germany professors who lose their jobs because they are seen as pro-Russia, which has nothing to do with pro-Russia. It's just they want to enter war or on Corona. 60 professors, I think, have lost their jobs. I mean, they really have it's not democracy, these things anymore. We have also defend democracy because I'm sure if you really ask people, democracy means asking people what they want. I don't think you would even find 10% who want war. I don't think that's the case because people are not like this. And also among the young people, it's not like this. No, I don't think so. I think democracy would bring more peace if we really have it, no? But we have a parliament who votes differently to what we know outside people want. And
do you think we can do anything in this house, the European Parliament, to help and influence for more pro-peace parliament?
I'm asking this myself. I mean, I've never been in a building like this one. I was just thinking, and the whole day I'm walking through air-conditioned corridors and rooms and things like this. But I mean, me, who's been always in the field. I mean, I've been always outside. As I said, Afghanistan, I went over the mountains. There are many other things like this one. For me, it's very difficult here. But what I try to do, I write and I publish and I give interviews like with you. And I hope the hope lies with people. And I think the biggest hope we should have is with young people. Young people have to decide what they want. And these are not difficult decisions.
You try to speak with other MEPs and trying to influence members of the European...
But I don't think I will influence the parliament. But what I can influence is the public opinion outside. Because when you read my articles, they are about these resolutions. If I hadn't written them, no newspaper would have ever written this. You know what we do here in parliament. This is basically sort of who knows something about the European Parliament. So I try to create public to it. I try to draw attention to it. I'm very keen on working with you because of this. If we all, and I mean particularly here young people, if we all decide against it, it will also be against it. It will be. There's no other solution to this one.
This is as well.
We're all people. What we want, if it's strong enough, and I'm not saying that you have to go to on the streets or whatever protest, but I mean, in elections or people start questioning these newspaper articles about all this, the demonization we take place and all the rest of it, is I think we would have better chance for peace. That's very important.
This is as well what's the conclusion that I came to, that I cannot change a lot of things here in the parliament, so let's change the public opinion.
Yeah.
So it's like something...
But that's what democracy is about, no? Isn't it? I mean, it's a democracy and not a parliamentary. The parliament should adjust to what people want outside. And for this one, as the UN Charter says, addresses every person, we the people. It's a very strong beginning, very unusual at the time. No, we the people. It addresses everybody, and
So let's get into foreign policy.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do this. So we have a war in Palestine and Israel. We also have a recent thing in Iran, with Syria as well, and Turkey and all these involvements. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the current state, and also later, I'm curious to hear also what should be the foreign policy of Europe.
You know, we are living now in a time where we have most of the wars since the end of the Cold War. Most wars. And if you look at them, they're all around Europe. They're all around us. And if you look closer to it, they're all fought with weapons from the West, Western weapons. You know, also Syria. Even the new Islamic Front over there, HTS or whatever it's called, the weapons come from us. So it's our weapons who maintain this war around us and create all the problems. So the first thing is maybe we should stop weapon exports. We would reduce the level of any violence which might still happen in these countries enormously, you know. So we don't need the militarization we do now in the European Union, because we have already militarized our neighborhood. So I think we should rather go back on this one and allow these countries to develop their own systems. I'm very, very much against interfering in other countries. They have to find their own system, and they will find their own system. We should rather be an example for them that maybe democracy is one way of making it better. But once we come there with an army, because we intervene constantly with military in these countries, people of course disavow democracy. These people say, "Oh, they come with force, but what democracy you want them to do here?" So foreign policy has fundamentally to change of the European Union. No? European Union was originally built on the idea of peace. No? That was the original founding members' things, and now we have turned into a warmongering. I mean, if Europe in this parliament, I mean, it's unbelievable what they say. I mean, it's worse what I've heard in the Iran-Iraq war, how Europeans talk about war. And we are now on the war path in Europe. And would we win it? We are losing it. We're losing economically. No? We are losing politically. And we're losing militarily that in Ukraine.
You mean Europe? You mean NATO as well, right?
Yeah.
So when you say Europe, you are mean about NATO?
Yeah,
right?
Europe is of course part. Most of the countries are part of NATO, and of course they participate in these wars outside. No, I mean, if Germany exports or France exports and UK exports and weapons, and this is of course Europe, and it's not only the United States. No.
So what happened in Syria, and what do you think? What will be the end of this? How can?
I think we know too little about these things. I mean, what strikes me as unbelievable is that people like President Biden or Chancellor Scholz sort of celebrate this of the fall of a dictator, and they support militarily somebody who comes from Al-Qaeda. I mean, then we align now with radical Sunni things might be very dangerous for Syria, because Syria has so many Christians and different Muslim religion. If now one of the factions wins now, I don't know what it's going to be for the country. I mean, it's too early for me to say. I don't know anything now about this. I mean, I used to know something about Syria because I worked also in Iraq, and these are very similar things. But no, I'm very worried what happens there for the people in Syria. And the question is, what is really wanted? What the West wanted with this one, no?
And Palestine, Israel. What do you think will be the solution as well there? And how do you describe the?
I think the Palestinians have a right to a state. They have a right to determine their own future. I think they have been, the accusation of a genocide. I'm not sure whether or not it fills this, but what happens is just abominable. The many people are killed and civilians killed in this war, the whole destruction of their housing for their living and things like this one. I think that exceeds anything that war would justify. And it will not solve the conflict.
It will create more.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, you can't kill them all, no? I mean, so
because you build hate between the two communities. Well, if you kill one of your brothers and sisters, like, you will never forget it.
I think in long term, it will be, as Israel has lost this war, no? And I mean, I'm German. I'm usually very pro-Israeli because of our past and things like this one. And but I think what Netanyahu does, or some of his ministers, will be, I could imagine, will be in the long term turn out as a destruction of Israel itself. Because, this image of Israelis or Jews being victims will be gone. And now they see it the other way around in the world. And, if you lose your image in the world, in global affairs, that's a huge cost to have, no? You can't fight against the entire world, no?
Tell me about it. What do you mean? So we're kind of the image so we're leveraging in conversations the image that the war has on us to win stuff. This is what you are describing, that Israel will lose this image.
Yeah. Israel is, of course, a creation. Essentially after the Second World War, of course, started before. Jews wanted to have a homeland, and they thought there had been 2,000 years before there. I mean, of course, it's a very unusual way of creating a state, to make it very carefully expressed. We couldn't imagine any other state to be created like this. But now every war is an expansion of Israel. And I think this time it is so long, it has so dear consequences also on Israeli soldiers and things like this one. I think the long-term consequence would be destabilizing Israel itself. What is Israel going to do afterwards? No? I think it's a typical example that you might win militarily by destroying something, but you lose a peace.
You might win one battle, but you will lose the war long term.
Yeah, I would say you lose a peace, no? And you might win militarily, but you lose a peace, and that's of course in many wars the case. Yeah.
And also, what is the outcome that you see in the near future in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at American analysis, I mean, the war is lost for the Ukraine, and that means also lost for NATO, no? And now with all this medium-range for rocket things, which is, by the way, very dangerous, because the first time NATO soldiers actually participated actively in a war. And we have to see how Russia is now going to retaliate.
It's crazy, very dangerous. This escalation later,
but it will not change the basics of the war. And Russia has broken through two of the defense lines, and the last one is, of course, the weakest. And so Kursk, they can hardly hold their land claim in Kursk and things like this one. I think that, I mean, the talk with, I'm not a military expert, but the talk I have from the United States, actually, from big think tanks, that's not just some crazy, is that the war is lost and that the Ukrainian army could collapse any time.
So you are expecting for this to end in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year?
It's much less, I think.
Much less?
I think the decision is there, yeah. It's only to accept the decision, yeah. I wish they would have a ceasefire. It would be better for Ukraine. Might not be better for Russia, by the way, ceasefire, because Russia might, the moment it breaks through the army line, it might go even to Odessa and other things. But if we have now a ceasefire, we would prevent this type of thing. And I think for Ukraine, I think it would be the better thing. So if we have European politicians like Mrs. Callas and so on, Mr. Kostas going to Kiev and say, we still need a victory, I think they don't know what they're talking about. They really don't know what they're talking about.
So they are delusional and clueless.
And delusions usually cost human lives, yeah.
So you think it's a horrible pick from our boss Ursula von der Leyen to choose Kaja Kallas and Costa?
Personal comments, but I think the worst pick is actually Mrs. von der Leyen herself. You know,
how you justify this?
You should not forget, we are in a stage in our universe, you know, with all the experience of wars, with all knowledge how arms have now developed, that obliges politicians to seek peace, you know, to protect peace. Peace is always a compromise. It's not never everybody get everything, but this is what it is. And I don't see that in the European Union, the case. And I could imagine, I'm going to give a lecture in January, which I call the 7 reasons why the European Union might run next year into great difficulties. You know, it is that the European Union has taken a policy that clashes with reality, and you cannot have a policy, a long-term policy, if you don't accept reality. And one of the reality is, of course, the loss of the war in Ukraine, but only one. And so, yeah, you have to do this, yeah.
So if you have policy that doesn't comply with reality, you will get long-term and short-term consequences.
Yeah, there is no such, you know, it's still the art of the feasible. You know, what is feasible? It means what is real. You know, you can't go to Kiev and say that you still want to have victory over Russia when the armies hardly exist, and when they have now 10,000 of deserters, the Ukrainian army. 10,000. I mean, how do you want to win? You can only provoke a nuclear war. That's you can do. But I mean, otherwise, so nuclear war would not be good for Ukraine, because I mean, 2 bombs and there wouldn't be any Ukraine. I mean, it is as bad as it is. I mean, I can't even imagine how these people think along these lines.
So what are the problems that you came here, you are 6 months MEP. You make me feel very bad, because you are the only person I talk here in the parliament that makes me feel unqualified to be here.
No, I must say, I find you're one of the most qualified people, because you do this, what is important, send the message out. This is the most important thing here in this parliament. So that's what you do. And I see you actually as one of the most important elements here. I tell you, I just talk, but you bring the message out. This is so important. We will only win peace if people decide that they want peace, in particular young people. That's why you are so important. So don't feel.
My question was about what is some stuff that you found that are very bad about, like how the functioning of the EU, that you get to understand the way, the democratic method, like how complicated it is, and from the inside now that you show something.
The parliament, from the working of the parliament?
Yeah.
I mean, you see, the parliament is in a grip of 3 to 4 major parties, or party associations, as they call it now. There's conservatives, you know, socialists, the Greens, and the conservatives, and the liberals. These are the 3, and they make all the decisions. We often don't even know that they had made the decisions. You know, I mean, we are sort of marginal, and then I can sometimes speak for one minute, and that will, of course, not make any change. So that's why I want to say again why you are so important. We will not win inside the parliament. The only chance we have is to win outside the parliament. And that's why we need people like you to bring the message outside. I can talk as much as I want here in this room. I mean, I wouldn't convince any of these parliamentarians that peace is important. But I can maybe convince people outside it's important, because they still have kept some common sense. Here we get so well paid that we forget about this common sense.
So you are saying it's impossible to change anything here. So it's impossible to change anything here.
I think so.
So there is a lot of things that you don't like about this. So you are basically came to the conclusion that or the parties are deciding, the big parties, the right and the left.
It's in all the parliament, so I mean...
They are deciding behind closed doors, they make the deal. It doesn't matter anyway, that's why we have von der Leyen. We don't know what they agree, what they get behind closed doors.
No, we know afterwards, but you know, we get, for instance, Ukraine resolution, we get them on the 16th of June, was it June or July? I don't know. And on the next day, there was already, or about 2 days afterwards, there was a decision on something which is so important that peace and war. And you know, yeah, but what can I do there? I mean, it's just, you know, I can make an interview, and I write an article, which is very widely published. I mean, my articles are usually published in 7 languages. And that's what I do. But I think what you do, you bring, my articles are read by a certain number of people. But we have to expand it, and that's why I'm so important to work with you. It's really important. I cannot emphasize that enough. So no, don't play it down. Don't play it down. This is what it is. No, you're laughing about it. I don't laugh about it at all. It's very important.
No, I agree as well. And also one of the things that my role here is like to interview people and to get all the sides, kind of the story, what the people that are pro the war they think, what the people against the war think. I try to play it like a journalist sometimes to have both of because I agree with having both of the arguments and people decide. But I want to do this. I told you as well. These are conversations that we're doing off camera, but people enjoy this gossiping stuff as well. I want to do this also every 2 months again with you, and we keep this a regular thing. We talk about the current state of the world and all this stuff. Because I
can tell you maybe next time more about Syria. I'm having tonight a conversation with. This is off the line, yeah?
No, it's not off the line. But we can bleep what you said. So
no, it's okay. But I will have a conversation with people in the United States, which are very well informed and actually are not quite close to the government. I mean, you know, they're more open society in the States than we are. And, you know, we'll probably know more about what it is. No?
About Syria and stuff. Interesting. So yes, we keep, but what I was trying to say was, you are one of the people that whatever you say, I mostly agree with. Because you are talking about, your message is very simple.
Yeah.
Peace. Let's try to do all compromises for peace. And this is like something that I fully agree with. So it's like, it's good to promote this and like talk about this and like because in this world it's like easy to, because you can state facts, like you can like explain things in a very convincing way and all this stuff. But it's like, I think there's nothing that can justify people dying. Even with the best arguments and all this stuff.
These are mostly very young people.
What?
Very young people who die?
Yes. In my age, people are less than my age, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah. You know, they are usually forced to...
People say 1 million people died in the war.
I'm not sure about
that.
Even with a few 100,000. I mean, these are people, these are sons, these are fathers of small children or whatever. You know, and then, it's an awful thing. It's an awful thing, and for nothing. You know, we know now that this war the Ukraine war could have been prevented by negotiations. You know, I wrote an article about the UN Charter and this war. We could have negotiated this problem. I think Russia was right to be concerned about its security, that having not wanted to have Americans and NATO on its border so close. The United States wouldn't have allowed it either if it would be Mexico or anything like this. So we could have negotiated. These are typical diplomatic things to negotiate. How you balance the security of Ukraine with the security concerns of Russia. That's what it's all about. And we didn't. So that's what we couldn't agree.
Let's go to German politics for a bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know so much about it.
Yes, but you are elected with a party that is very interesting, with Sahra Wagenknecht's party, and is like very successful in Germany, and is probably going to determine, or you have elections soon as well. And if you continue with the growth that you get as a party, you are going to probably be one of the ruling coalitions that will have the president and all this stuff. So
I'm not so sure, but I mean,
it's possibility.
Yeah, possibility. But let's stay strong. I mean, you shouldn't forget, we are the only party in Germany who has a peace agenda, a full peace agenda. We're against export of weapons, irrespective of Ukraine or Israel. You know, the AfD, our competition, is only Ukraine, but not there. We are against armament. We are against the medium-range missiles being placed in Germany, because I think we could be peaceful with each other. We don't all need these threats. So I think we are against using huge budgets for military spending and not and cutting on social benefits. No, this is so. We are, in this sense, we are very, very consequent. We link our opposition to war with our concern for social justice. You know, these two things belong together. And in this sense, we are the only party. You know?
So it matches your values personally.
Yeah, that's why I'm there. Yeah.
And you told me that you didn't want to be here, but you did it as in a way as a favor for Sahra, right?
Because of my wife. No, really.
What do you mean?
I get always very early up. You know, I write regular articles. No, they're widely published. No, so Sahra Wagenknecht, she put my article always on her website, and she said, Michael, this is a policy would like to have in the European Parliament and things like this one. So she calls me up one morning and says, wouldn't you like to be on the list, to go to the Parliament? You know a lot about war and peace, and you know about negotiations and about international law. And this is something very few people know about. No? I mean, you have experienced war and things like this one. And I said, no. I said, I'm an old guy. What do you want me? So, no, I should listen. But at 9 o'clock, I go back in bed because I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock. And that's where I meet my wife, because she's still in bed. And I said, Sahra called me. She said, Michael, don't you want to go for me in the Parliament? And I said, no, I'm not going. And I think my wife is very happy because we can do things. It's not all politics and things like that. And she said, Michael, are you crazy? Of course you do this. This is what you always liked. You always liked Sahra. You always thought she's the greatest politician we have in Germany. Now you can do something for her. So I went back to the telephone. Sahra, I accept. Sahra accepted.
Okay. So your wife is a big influence sometimes in your decisions.
Of course, anybody who's married should do this. Yeah, she is. Yeah. And I like it. Yes, I like it.
So are you happy now in your life?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I'm very concerned. I think we are in the most dangerous situation in the world, probably even more dangerous than
in your lifetime.
Oh, in my lifetime, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think this, we play with nuclear bombs now. And we should never do this. Nuclear arms are nuclear arms. And, they are now 100 times more powerful what we have in Hiroshima, any of these bombs. And I think we should really be more sensitive to put away with these bloody bombs. I mean,
so you're happy, but you're very concerned about the state of the world.
Die on nuclear things. I mean, some die immediately, but those who die a long-term effect because of radiation. It's an awful death also. No, I don't wish this.
And because it's very hard we talk about nuclear, and we cannot even grasp. I was not alive to understand this thing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki that happened with the nuclear bomb. It's like something that we don't really understand how it works as well. So we're playing with.
But we should be all aware that this is the worst of all what can happen to people. And we should prevent this. We should prevent this by any cost. And I'm sure that there is a negotiated solution to almost anything there is. Yeah.
So I want people to know that there is some fresh air inside the parliament. Some people have...
Not in this room, you must say. This is an air-conditioned room, which makes you very tired. You don't even have a window. But we will go outside afterwards and have a coffee, okay?
No, I mean that To my surprise, I found a lot of logical people as well in the parliament. Like 10% of the MEPs, they are very cool and they have interesting thoughts. So they're not everyone like we're describing. So there is a lot of good, cool people as well here in the parliament. But I like to ask another 2-3 questions, and then we'll let you go sleep and have meetings about Syria. So. What do you think about this conversation that we did today?
Oh, I want to ask you.
You had fun?
Yes, of course, yes. No, I think it's fine. No, but you have to know. I mean, I'm not the expert. I don't know how these things come along because I don't think about these things. But you should know if this is okay and if you find that it's an interesting thing and things like this.
But you had fun?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, good. It's difficult to have fun here in the parliament. I have fun 24/7 here in the parliament, but I think I'm one of the few people.
No, you have to be careful that it doesn't take you all over your concerns. No, of course you should have fun. Of course, yeah.
And having fun is the most serious thing that you can do sometimes.
Okay. If you say so, I will. That's something I learned.
So another question that I ask all the people that I interview is, you are going to die in 30 seconds. What do you want your last words to be in this planet? If you are actually going to die in 30 seconds, what is your message to the people? Or to your wife or to someone if you had 30 seconds?
I would say that I love my wife, I think, maybe. Yeah. Love is maybe this what is left when everything else is gone. Yeah. I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
love you. Thank you for your time. Thank you guys for listening. This was super, super fun. And he's amazing.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you too.